Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 362, featuring Christina Heller, the CEO of Metastage, a fascinating a woman who has done amazing work in the world of VR and XR. And I was really fascinated to have this conversation with her. And I really want to thank Sally Slade for introducing me to her and being able to get her on. It was really cool. Kristen, what did you think of Christina?
She's had an amazing career. She's started like a number of companies, and the biggest being the VR content company, VR Playhouse, and convincing people it was a good idea. And that was an awesome story. And then her next venture, which is Metastage, kind of where she said she found her place in the industry. And Metastage does volumetric capture, which brings real world performances and people into a digital environment. So it's just, you guys get into it. Kind of the recording process and how Metastage is also, she couldn't talk about it, but they're going to be doing some more very exciting things soon and possibly live hologram. So, and then you guys get into the Metaverse. So it's just a great podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's really cool. And, you know, we've been talking about, you know, a volumetric capture for a long time in different forms and different ways, including light fields and things of that nature. But I was really fascinated by what Metastage does is not only because of what they do, but also because they're very efficient, extremely efficient in terms of the amount of data they can do into these volume captures and these performances. You can get a full digital human volume capture, and there was something she said I think like 80 megs a minute, which is crazy compression and very smart. So very impressed with that, and really cool to sit down with Christina. Obviously we couldn't do it in person, but it was really great to be able to do that. So thank you so much, Christina, for being on. Now we have an event coming up. What's going on, Kristen?
All right. So on February 17th, so it's a few days away, we have an online, it's going to be Chaos Campus Live show, episode 1. So our host, Nikolopoulos. Yes. And his guest, Isaac Zurin, will discuss kind of how you can break into the VFX industry, kind of what goes behind the scenes on some of your favorite movies. And they also talk about how Isaac, who was like once a fresh graduate, scored a job at ILM. So it'll be a really awesome episode. So you don't want to miss that. And you go to chaos.com/events to find out more.
Perfect. Yeah. Again, that's chaos.com/events and find out more about this. And Nico's giving his episode 1 of his Chaos Campus live show, which will be very exciting. Meantime, we don't really have any news, but I do want to do an acknowledgement. Doug Trumbull passed away last week, last week. And he was truly a legend in the world of visual effects and special effects, and an absolutely amazing person who I had the pleasure of working with when we did the Construct project, and we did Construct version for his Magi specs, which is 120 frames a second and stereo and 4K, and a really incredible guy. He was really very important, obviously, for the incredible visual effects work that he did on things like, you know, Close Encounters and 2001: Space Odyssey and Blade Runner and a lot more. But he's also a great director, and I really love Brainstorm is one of my favorite films, believe it or not. I absolutely love it, and I'm really, you know, our condolences to his family, and you know, he will be remembered. And we do have an episode of Doug that you can check out, so go check out episode with Doug Trumbull that we did a couple of years ago, and it was really great. So anyway, just want to acknowledge that, and that's it. So okay, but if people want to know more about the podcast in general, Kristen, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have any ideas for other podcasts you'd like to hear about, or you want to know more about some different volume capture systems or AR systems or whatever, let us know. Just email us. labs@chaosgroup.com is the best way to do that. But for now, enjoy episode number 362 with Christina Heller.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays In high dynamic range, we know that ambient occlusion is passe. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
So I was introduced to you through Sally. And so I know that you and Sally have met, I'm assuming through Magnopus. Was that right?
That's how we initially met, but at this point, I would call us industry friends.
Yeah. Okay. But what were you guys doing back then? What was it that you were working on?
Well, so Magnopus is a formal partner of Metastage, and therefore, actually the way I was introduced to Sally was we needed someone to do custom Python scripts, and Ben Grossman said, I think I have just the woman for you. We'll send her over. So we actually had a nickname for her at Metastage, which was Python Sally, for like the first couple weeks, and obviously since then it's we've collaborated with her on other projects, and I hang out with her socially sometimes too.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. That's really great. All right. So what I'd like to know is, I've looked a little bit into Metastage. I looked at some of the things you've done, which is very exciting. I've actually got it on my phone as well, which is actually kind of fun as well. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about your background and where that came from and what got you interested in computer graphics, and then eventually this entire AR experience as well.
Yeah. So I've worked in media production, for many years. Even before that, I was in high school, I was a theater nerd and I did theater production. And then in college, I moved into radio production, and then got into video and worked in independent filmmaking and journalism. So, and always was interested in both, front of house and back of house, creative and technical. And so it was towards the end of my 20s, after I had been working in media more broadly for many years, that I became interested in the intersection of media and technology, and was focusing on that a lot when I happened to try a DK1 VR headset at New Frontiers 2014. And that was my answer. I thought, okay, this is where technology and media intersect. And what if I tried to become an expert in making content for this medium now at this early stage? And that was, the beginning of 2014. So, it's been quite a journey, as you can imagine.
Yeah. I think I remember, I would want to say it was around 92 or so. I tried a VR headset that was, like the size of a huge disc that went around your head. And so I remember I was like, this is weird and it's interesting, but I was very curious about it. But I knew at some point it was going to come back. And when I saw the DK1 come in, and it was literally, I think it pretty much was a ski mask with a phone glued to it.
Yes, literally.
Right. So I was like, but hold on a second, this is brilliant, because we have all of that technology is kind of working, and it's light and it's everything else. So I knew that something interesting was going to happen at that point. But yeah, I was very, very curious about what was going on. So obviously 2014 seems like it was just yesterday, but it's actually been quite a while since all of that has happened. What got you interested in that? Like, what was that journey once you started to realize that you had a VR headset, you knew something interesting with technology, and what were the things that you learned in terms of telling stories in VR or the different mediums that you're doing in VR as well?
Well, it is such a big question, Chris, and the answer, if I was to really go in depth, would take hours, because if you think about these 7 years in immersive technology, they've been huge ones. And then also for me personally in my career, I have done a lot in these 7 years. We initially, after Sundance, I had also started a few small production companies at that point, and I was comfortable with the process of starting companies, and so had the brilliant idea of starting a VR content company that year. And my most ambitious endeavor to date. And, talked to some of my creative colleagues at that time and convinced them that this was a good idea, that we should start a VR content company. And, just this idea that, hey, there aren't any real experts in it yet. And we'll be as well suited as anybody to address these challenges. And we assembled a team with a diverse set of backgrounds, film, CG, theater, journalism, to form VR Playhouse, which was my first company. And we got our start with 360 video. We're looking at the GoPro era where you're self-stitching videos, but also YouTube 360 came out. And all of a sudden there was a platform for distributing 360 video content. And it was a new exciting medium. And there weren't many folks who were good at shooting for it, editing for it, stitching it. And we started getting some contracts for, with the cutting edge agencies and marketing companies that love to do new things when they come out. And so that's how we got started. Of course, that led into eventually more ambitious game engine and projects, augmented reality, virtual reality. And over the course of the 3 years that I led VR Playhouse, we did 65 projects that spanned mediums, verticals, clients. We had tried a lot of different stuff over that period of time. And then after that, I decided I wanted to specialize more in the space. I was feeling a little burnt out after 3 years of honestly what can only be described as my doctorate, I don't know, my master's and doctorate put together. And then I was approached with the opportunity to launch and lead Metastage, which was at least at its outset, the goal was to specialize in producing volumetric video for integration into XR projects. And volumetric video, if you're not familiar, and we'll get more into this, is authentic, real 3D performance capture. So if you want to put real people and real performances into these virtual mediums, you capture them at a stage like ours, and we make that possible. And so for me, Metastage, everything had been leading up to this opportunity and this incredible opportunity, to work with Microsoft, to have investors, to launch a cutting edge studio. And I also was excited because I had a background in nonfiction filmmaking and story and journalism that felt like a good, foundation for authentic performance capture. And I was like, oh, I think I found I found my place in this industry,
Right.
And kind of it brought it all together. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I actually I'm gonna go. There's a lot of things you described. I want to get through
There's
all
a
of it.
lot of things there.
Yeah. But I do want to sort of talk a little bit about obviously your VR experience as you went through your VR Playhouse. What I know about obviously the challenges of all the technology that was existing and the limitations that were existing in 360 video, and that's a big challenge that you had to manage as well. But I'm very curious also to think about the creative challenges that were involved in creating content that is 360 video. Yeah. What you don't see as much of that content today, and I think that there was an exercise that people went through that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to use that type of content. But what were some of the lessons that you learned through that, and how do you think that's going to help us in the future?
Yeah. I actually look back really fondly on all of that creative brainstorming that happened during that era. That was where I got to work a lot with our creative director, Dylan Southard, who came from a theater background and had done a lot of immersive theater. And it was just really fun to be testing, experimenting, and figuring out these things. So obviously there was a lot of conversation on how do you direct the viewer's gaze. And I think one of the things we learned is that when people sat down, they initially, of course, would spin all around. There was always that initial acclimation period where they had to soak in that they were in this 360 world and they could look anywhere. And to be honest, some people just couldn't get over that novelty value. And so no matter what you tried to do in terms of directing their gaze, they were always going to be looking all around. And then vice versa, you also had folks that just didn't want to move that much. And so they kind of were directing most of their attention into the front 180 sphere. And that's where a lot of your action happened. I think we learned that you can do a lot of clever direction of gaze with audio and with light, And I also think that it was cool to reward those adventurous folks who wanted to look all around in 3 directions by planting like maybe an Easter egg or 2 in the back, which if they did turn around, it wouldn't be nothing. That being said, we also played with creative where there was really nothing in the background, where it was like placing you in an environment, and the goal was presence.
Right.
So if you turned around, there wasn't really too much to see because you're just in a field. But so you're kind of more naturally attracted to gazing at the subject, which is probably the actor you're interacting with.
Right.
So and then there was also a lot of conversation around editing. You know, how can you edit for this medium? Can you do cuts? Are they jarring? I think the jury actually is out on that. You know, like I think initially the idea was don't cut too much. But then also we used to do sizzle reels with lots of cuts and people thought they were exciting. And so, you know, again, it was really about kind of putting someone in it and having them go through it and just evaluating like their level of comfort. And then finally, motion sickness was a big learning as well. We did a whole shoot in Nicaragua, actually, where we shot like a ton of moving footage with this like very cool Steadicam that one of our employees had designed custom for these 360 rigs, and it created a very steady flow. We shot a ton of content with it when we were down in Nicaragua, only to come back and realize that it made, me at least, totally sick when watching it. And I think there was a learning, which was if you have some kind of stationary element like a car or a spaceship or something to ground you in that virtual reality, then you can move and not feel sick. But unless you have that grounding like element, there's something about your like brain or eye connection that makes you motion sick. So yeah, that just it begins to scratch the surface of some of the creative challenges. And I want to give a little shout out to teams like Felix and Paul, who I think really just led the way in terms of making that medium a legitimate storytelling medium. And still, I think their work still really holds up.
For sure. I think what's interesting is like, when I was sort of looking at this space and people were doing things in VR, there was so many people that came up with, which seemed to me arbitrary rules of here's the rules of VR or whatever you need to think about. And then I saw so many people break those rules completely successfully. So that I really sort of wondered, it's like, well, I think there's something very interesting about it. You said how many pieces? 65 pieces?
We did 65 different projects over those 3 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a huge amount of work.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, was it, during that time, there was probably a huge demand for a lot of content being made. Is that the case?
Well, it was, when I say 65 projects, I mean that VR Playhouse touched in some way 65 different projects, whether that was us stitching video, doing post on something someone else shot, whether that was, like working with a different team on it, taking on one component or doing an end-to-end activation. And so, we were a bootstrapped company. We didn't have investors. All of our profits were just reinvested back into the company. And that's how we ran it for 3 years. And so to be honest, when I look at the volume of work, I think it really was driven by a lot of anxiety, just like, just that worry, like, oh, we got to make payroll. So we have to take on as much as anybody will offer us in terms of work,
right?
To get by. And so like that, when I look back on that crash course that was for me as a business person, as a creative, like, there were, oh my gosh, so many things that we went through in those 3 years. But I still think, there's some standout projects that come out from that era. And overall, I think when most of the people who worked at VR Playhouse look back on that time, it was like a very special time and place that will like never be recreated. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and also like the excitement of like VR during 2015, 2016, like that was a very heady time period for our industry. So
absolutely, I can really imagine. What were some of the standout projects that you would?
Yeah, well, like just a few that come to mind. We worked on a piece called "Defying the Nazis" with Ken Burns and Time, and with Ken Burns to do a VR companion piece for a documentary they made, and it was like one of the pieces of content the Time VR app launched with. And, you know, it was a beautiful piece. It was very cool to be able to work with Ken Burns, and, you know, a real honor to be part of their, you know, premiere catalog. Then we also shot an original 360 film that I don't think got seen very much, but it was called Girl. And we went to Joshua Tree and filmed a script that was written by these female theater like playwriters, all from the perspective of a young girl. And it was just it was exciting to get to finally make like some real independent original content as opposed to doing commercial work. But on the commercial work side, you know, we did a piece for Chevron where we did a 360 exploration of the Jack St. Malo, which was is the largest offshore drilling rig in I think in the world, and it was like in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And our team flew out on helicopters to this oil rig in the middle of the ocean and filmed like all this 360 content there. I think the New York Times ended up publishing it because it ended up being like kind of an interesting piece of journalism as opposed to. And I mean, the list goes on and on. We did this crazy thing for Jack in the Box. Like it was just, we did a lot of stuff, you know, and at the end of the day, you know, it comes and goes in the consciousness of the public. But for everybody who worked on it, you know, these are our battle stories, and and you know, it made us who we are.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I think those are. I mean, there was a lot of amazing stuff, and you know, good. Felix and Paul obviously is well known for what the content is and drove some of that content and the ideas of what it was.
For sure.
I always was interested, you know, I had seen several pieces that are done and it's always a challenge to me because VR is such a first person experience and storytelling is such a third person experience. And somehow if you can able to find a way to make both work, and I have seen it done successfully, it's very interesting when it's done because sometimes you feel like you're on a ride at Disneyland and it's not as fun that time. But sometimes it's like, oh, this is great. This totally makes sense, you know, and I'm really excited when I see those types of things, and those mediums are very, very exciting for sure.
Well, to jump in on that and to give Felix and Paul one more shout out, you know, if you look at like their work and what makes it strong, I do think it's the less is more philosophy. And you know, they are just so intentional with every single like if they move the camera, they are very intentional about it. Everything is super intentional. And, you know, if you're listening and you haven't had the chance and you have a headset, you know, if you have any kind of headset, you can watch Traveling While Black, which is on the Oculus Store and is one of the most beautiful pieces of like 360 filmmaking, I think, in existence. And you'll see what I mean when I talk about the less is more thing.
Yeah.
And so again, there are no rules to this content, but I think that certainly, you know, yeah, you don't need to do like big wild camera moves and a roller coaster to move somebody to tears in a VR headset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just something very interesting for sure. I'm always reminded of one of my favorite films, Brainstorm, that came out a long time ago, but and it was really about you know, recordings people's thoughts and how to do that. And so it was just fascinating. So I've been thinking about this since my childhood.
Nice.
Very excited about it.
Nice.
Okay. Well, all right, let's talk a little bit about Metastage. So obviously, you know, you guys are creating volumetric capture systems. That's basically what I've seen, and it's really, really good. And I actually do remember having conversations with Ben Grossman about it a long time ago when he was talking about Microsoft and what they're trying to do. And this is very interesting. So describe for the audience a little bit about the technology that you guys are doing and what that is implying, and what are you getting out of this, and how is Microsoft involved in all of this?
Sure. Well, first let's remove all of the tech. Let's take away all the cameras and the software for a minute and just talk about what we're actually doing here, which is bringing real people with their full physical presence. That means, you know, the full 3 dimensions of your body, head to toe, you know, the most, in some ways, complete, you know, capture, if you will, of a person, and bringing them into AR and VR experiences. So, you know, it can liken ideas to hollow presence, holograms. You know, this basically, you know, capturing a person, a performance at our stage, and making that something that people can view on headsets or in any kind of three-dimensional medium, as if that person is standing right in front of them.
Right.
So that's what we're doing at Metastage. And we do it, but with, as you can imagine, a lot of very sophisticated technology.
Sure.
We have 106 cameras that capture the performance from every possible angle. And we then put all of that capture data through a software system that Microsoft spent 10 years developing. Okay. And Metastage was the first company in the Western Hemisphere and the second company globally to ever commercially offer this capability to the public. And so, it was, the team at Magnopus and also the rest of our investment team came together and we're just so excited about being first to bring such an exciting new technology to market, and so excited about the potential that it could, enable the folks that had that magic capability, that they decided to take the risk on, honestly, what's kind of a crazy idea, invest a bunch of money into holographic tech to launch a state-of-the-art capture stage in Los Angeles, California. It's a ballsy move.
Right.
And I benefited because I had just moved on from VR Playhouse 6 months prior, and they were like, oh wow. Well, they're like, okay, so we want to do it, but who's actually going to do it? Right. Who's going to?
Sure.
And then that's when I got contacted about the opportunity. So it's really a partnership between Metastage and Microsoft and then whomever we work with on any given project to bring their ideas and their visions to life.
Okay. All right. Well, it is quite good. I've seen the demos of it, and I'm pretty impressed. The idea of volumetric capture is kind of a complicated process because you have to capture lots of things in sync, cameras and everything, and then that's the first problem. You have to compile all that data, and then the second problem is actually being able to play it back on small devices.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So my phone has to be able to play basically something that could be tons and tons and tons of data. How, obviously Microsoft made this technology possible, but what were some of the challenges that you had to do on your side? You have to create the stage. Was there a specific set of rules based on the Microsoft standard that allowed you to build the stage? Is that how it works?
Yes. We were given, guidelines based on the stage in San Francisco and the stage in London on, architecture and configuration. That being said, our partners at Magnopus, and specifically a guy named Jason Crosby.
Oh, I know Jason.
You know Jason?
Yes.
Yeah. Shout out to Jason Crosby. Built a custom architecture and design for our stage at Metastage, and to optimize in terms of quality and also, production day considerations. So, for instance, all of our towers are on these tracks that we can just roll in and out. So if we have to do multiple configurations in a day, it leads to a speedy reconfiguration with a lot of accuracy. And we have, I think every stage has different lighting setups. We have, 20 airy sky panels on our stage that do the full RGB spectrum and allow for a lot of beautiful lighting, that I think really does affect the capture quality that we get at Metastage. We love our Aries. And then once you get past the software, you get instructed on best practices and how to push the buttons here and there. But at the end of the day, we became experts on working with this software to produce the kind of results that, our company is known for. And so, because what's kind of cool about being so focused on volumetric capture in the last few years is we just ask every day, how we can make our captures better and, be more ambitious with the type of content we produce and provide a better experience to the people who come in and work with us. So we have, our own little tricks and hacks and little things like that that are part of like a Metastage pipeline.
Right.
But credit where credit's due. Microsoft did build a very commercially viable and impressive volumetric capture system.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's very impressive. What are some of the limitations that exist? Because I was watching a really interesting video of what's her name, who was showing her process of going through your Metastage.
Laura,
that's right.
Yeah.
And she was showing that process, and obviously she was talking about like the challenges of the earring can't be, too thick or things of that nature. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense, right? And me as a CG person, I'm also thinking about the lighting and or the properties of the clothes that you wear, like things that are too shiny or not too shiny, or how does that work? Like, what are some of the challenges that you see there that are
so we actually have a mantra, which is like, when in doubt, test. Because again, almost like the conversation we had about VR storytelling, like you can say no shiny things, but if you see, like, look at the capture we did with Lara Risotto, she's wearing a shiny purple outfit and it captured beautifully. So we do just, like, at the end of the day, love to just run a quick test of whatever wardrobe we might be like intent on capturing and see how it solves. That being said, we can definitely spot things that might be potential hazards, from just like a photograph alone, and anything that's too thin, the system like has trouble reconstructing, and therefore like it'll just disappear. So if you have like a stiletto heel, for instance, it won't be able to create a reconstruction of that tiny heel, and it will look like she's just kind of floating, without a heel. If you were doing something with a golf club, for instance, the golf club itself would probably not solve, and therefore you might see the head of it, but you wouldn't see the shaft. And then, glasses and hair are like a classic, challenge when it comes to volumetric video. Glasses, again, are very thin and often conform to the face. We have seen successful, CG implementation of glasses after the fact, and often like we have a mocap system on our stage as well. So we will, like, if we're doing like a golf club, for instance, we will put trackers on the golf club, and then we can do a CG replacement of that golf club in post. Or you can like put trackers on a face and add glasses in post. But it just won't capture at a quality level that most people are going to be happy with. Same with hair down, especially if it's wavy and all over the place. But that being said, we have been more liberal with hair down captures in the last 6 months. I think our software there have been upgrades that have made the hair down quality acceptable, depending on what your tolerance is. And also it kind of depends on the hair and the haircut and things like that. But but then also, we've worked with clients who have a very high threshold for artifacting and mistakes or things that don't look right. We worked a lot in the early days with this company, Jadu, on a lot of really musician captures and things. And they were emphatic that they wanted to capture the performer or the artist in whatever clothes they wanted to wear, however their hair was, with whatever props, because that was them. And if it was messy, they didn't care, because it still like had the essence of the artist as a piece of it. And so those were really fun, actually, to just break all the rules and see what happened,
Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned obviously in musicians as a big performances in that stage is a really interesting thing. What are some of the use cases that people have seen for this technology, and what does it allow people to do? Like what are some of the interesting projects?
Oh, they're varied and broad.
I'm sure.
So I really am emphatic about volumetric capture for training, for VR training. Anything you're doing in VR or AR training where you're using like a cheesy synthetic avatar, talk to me. Give me an opportunity to pitch you on volumetric captures of real people for those training experiences, because my feeling is that, the more realistic the training experience, the better the outcome. And if you're trying to teach about anything relating to human behavior, you should use real people to teach about that. So I'm big on like, if you're already into the VR training space, volumetric video is like a shoe-in for that. And you can also bring in like real subject matter experts, or you can have like highly trained actors paired with those subject matter experts. Then, We've done a ton of stuff with sports, obviously being able to see athletes in their full physical presence, being able to learn from them. So we've done like Megan Rapinoe, the soccer player, on how she kicks the soccer ball. We've done Ray Allen on how he does his 3-point shot. We've done a ton of stuff with athletes, and I don't see that stopping. I think that the desire to see our athletes in holographic 3 dimensions is definitely compelling. Musicians are always looking for interesting ways to connect with their audience. You can also use these captures in a virtual production scenario. So we've done a few different music videos where the intended outcome is just a framed video, but they're making it in Unreal or Unity or maybe even a VFX pipeline. And the performance is a vol-cap asset. So they can do like crazy camera moves and stuff. And then fashion, again, like capture the full outfits, be able to do interesting marketing activations. Medical training, we partner a lot with a company called Gig XR. And then finally, and this isn't even the sum of it all, but I'll throw in like legacy and education, like bringing in Holocaust survivors, Black Panthers,
right?
To immortalize them and their stories for future generations.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously, learning from holograms is something Superman taught us. So I can actually completely believe that is a good process to work with. I'm really fascinated by people exploring this medium, and it's the fact that you're looking at so many different use cases and so many ideas. I'm really curious also about the virtual production idea. I've a big passion for virtual production myself, and just the idea of doing a capture of a real person and then inserting them into the location that you want and doing that. So is your asset, just obviously we can use the assets you'd use in an AR setting or a VR setting, but is it also just something that you could open up into Unreal or Unity as well in some ways?
Yes.
You can bring it in?
Yes,
Okay.
for sure. Like Unity and Unreal are the main points of integration for most of our projects, or we'll do like a web integration for like web AR or like a spatial web experience. But like we have Unity and Unreal plugins. We really, at Metastage, we broke ground on this concept with a project we did for Samsung, a commercial starring Charli XCX, and that was with an amazing agency in New York, RGA. And the problem or the challenge was they only had Charli for a certain amount of hours for one day. They needed to have like a bunch of different backgrounds, like put her in different environments to sell the concept for the commercial that they were looking to sell. And they wanted to do really fun, exciting camera moves, like the type that Gen Z and the gaming generation have kind of come to expect. And that was going to cost a lot of money to get that type of physical gear. And in the end, they decided to take a leap of faith and try volumetric capture for this commercial. So on Charli's side, she came in, put on the outfits, did her performances in her various costumes, and once she nailed the performance, she was done. She could leave. We did also shoot some close-ups of her against a traditional green screen at Metastage because we weren't sure like how close you'd be able to get to the volumetric capture and it still maintain its fidelity. And because it was like a Samsung earbud commercial, we needed to have her like putting in the earbuds, or sorry, the buds too. I think that's what that she needed to be putting in the buds. So we did the vol cap, and then we also did a lot of traditional green screen. In the end, we ended up being able to get much closer to the volumetric video and it still hold up, and you really not be able to know that it was a volumetric asset than we expected. They've only relied on the green screen shots for like really just the shots where she's putting in her ear or tapping her ear. And we found that basically if you got to basically her waist and up, it held, And so then what was great was that all of the creative was done in post. They were able to try a lot of interesting camera moves. A VFX on Charli, they turned her into like a TLC waterfalls-ish, water hologram at one point. They did a lot of fun stuff. And it was just a very successful campaign. And then finally, they ended up saving a lot of money because they didn't have to go through the aspects of the physical production that were going to inflate the cost.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, I'm very curious about, all of those use cases. I think those are very fascinating. And I think that this is really great what you guys are doing. Let's talk a little bit about the name Meta in the Meta stage and the fact that this is now becoming a big buzzword. Obviously, everyone's talking about what this implies and where people are going to be able to exchange data. Do you feel that what you've accomplishing here is sort of introducing a new way of putting media into what people are going to be calling the metaverse at some point?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, give credit to Ben Grossman for the name of the company. That was his idea.
Okay.
And he was, as always, ahead of the curve.
Sure.
And I mean, absolutely. I think that every project is attempting to do something that, that is new and different. I do think that with the advancements in real-time production and virtual production, and as spatial technologies become more integrated into our day-to-day life, 3D, everything 3D is going to be necessary for those mediums. And so, we do environment scannings too. We don't talk about it much, but we do have a LiDAR scanner at Metastage, and scanning real environments is another service we provide. And yeah, we're creating assets and holograms that really are future proofed and can stand the test of time on all of the display technology that evolves in the next 10, 20 years. And I don't see us, people always ask how long till you think it's going to be mainstream, and I don't know, man. I started in 2014. I thought we'd be much further ahead, along by 2022 than we have been. But there's no doubt that we keep getting closer and closer and closer to this immersive tech.
Right.
And so yeah, it's not going away, and the work we do fits perfectly into this new.
Absolutely. Medium. Absolutely. I'm actually more curious about when you say mainstream, it's more, I'm thinking about what is it going to be when I can just sit in my house and capture my volume at some point. Is that, do you see that happening at some point, or?
Absolutely. I think there's already some interesting innovations happening with, consumer volumetric capture. And so it's something we discuss at Metastage. We don't want to cut ourselves off from that low end consumer market, but I do think there was always going to be a place for that high end professional production component too. So
of course.
Yeah. But as it is right now, it's still, it's still early days for consumer, I can do it with my phone volumetric capture, but obviously that is our phone. My phone has a LiDAR scanner on it. That's sure. It's only a matter of time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very curious because I think that there's going to be some, I'm thinking of TikTok, right? I'm thinking of things of that, where people are going to create. Now, what I think is great is that you guys are creating volumes. And so you can create the performance that someone can interact with. Right. So that becomes the thing here's the person doing his 3-point shot. And then I can be right next to them doing my 3-point shot at the same time, and so that becomes something that's very exciting and be able to capture that in an interesting way. But I'm also curious, when do I get to be a hologram?
Yeah. Well, when you come to Metastage,
exactly.
we'll do a quid pro quo, you're gonna, we'll do a quick scan of you.
Yeah. That would be, that is great. I think, there's something really interesting about the idea of preserving legacy in a lot of ways as well. So I'm really curious about that process. Have you guys explored, or did you do any exploration, or you have any thoughts on the idea of light fields as well?
Yeah, well, I'm friends with Paul DeBevic, and I've been on a number of panels with him. And back in my VR Playhouse days, we did a project with Lytro before they went out of business.
I was working with them as well. So
yeah. And so light field is also a fascinating area of development, but it always seems to me still very data heavy, and so I guess until it kind of becomes a more commercially viable process, I'm still just in the audience, like kind of excitedly watching its development, you know? But I think anything that falls into the area of like bringing the real world into virtual platforms is an area of like passion for me. And I think Lightfield obviously fits into that bucket.
Right. I mean, to me, if I looked at Lightfield, I'd say, well, okay, well, Lightfield is the ultimate goal, like, because that'll have everything, right? But because it has everything, it's huge.
Yeah.
But I've seen the performances that you guys are doing, like I said, and I was like, me remembering the exercise of going through Lightfield, I was like, I don't know if I really need the Lightfield.
Right. Because you can marry a volume, a LiDAR scan, a beautiful high resolution LiDAR scan of a physical environment with a high resolution volumetric capture from Metastage, and you're getting the closest thing to like a live action 6 degrees of freedom VR experience. And I guess the one of the areas that's still in a lot of R&D is like relighting for volumetric assets. It's still a bit of a challenge, although we have great clients who are doing some pretty groundbreaking work in the areas of relighting our captures and all of that. But yeah, I feel you. There's because at the end of the day, that's the thing. Like, tech is interesting, but if it's not commercially viable and like can be distributed on the common devices that the regular public uses, then it's a science experiment, it's an R&D experiment, or it's like a location-based activation. And they all have their value, but I think at Metastage we're most interested, at least for now, in the stuff that can be brought to market today to mass audiences.
Yeah. There was another thing specifically when it was coming to volume captures that were or scanning even, that was becoming very popular. Certainly an area of discussion was thinking about geometry as polygons or thinking of them as point clouds. What are your thoughts on that? First of all, do you guys use? I'm assuming based on what I saw, I think you guys are using geometry like polygons.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
But it starts with the point cloud. We actually we using our infrared cameras, we generate we put out a lot of points. Then we generate a point cloud from the data that comes from the infrared cameras, and then that point cloud is decimated to a certain amount of polygons, and using a UV map, all of the texture and visual data is applied to those polygons. But it is very much a polygonal mesh that you're seeing,
right?
With some normals as well that we're generating.
Okay, well that's okay, but it's got to be fairly compact.
Yes, no, we're talking, depending on the point of distribution, we go as low as 10,000 polygons. That's the lowest amount of polygons we generate. But you'd be amazed at how good even the captures look at 10,000 polygons. If you look at the Metastage app, those are 20,000. So we integrated 20,000 polygons into the app, and that's again just a credit to the software that it manages to keep what's most important and discard what's not, so that you end up getting something that looks good but is small.
Right. Well, okay, that's really great. And obviously you can get a lot of detail out of normals if you need them, so that's also a big thing. What is your frame rate that you guys capture at?
We can capture at either 30 or 60.
Okay.
But we really, if someone needs 60, we really push them on like, do you really need 60? Because keep in mind, if we're capturing with 106 cameras, and now you're doubling the frame rate, you're talking about double the amount of data. So we do shoot at 60 on occasion if it's for a specific use case, but for the most part, we're shooting at 30.
Right. But people should realize, or at least I'm assuming they should realize, that just because you're capturing the data at 60 doesn't mean that you're limiting your playback on your headset to be, you're still going at 90 hertz or 120 hertz on your headset, right?
Correct.
So the performance is just 30, but you can still move around it at 120 hertz, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people don't always realize, like, no, I'm going to get 6 at 30. It's like, well, you're talking about the performance itself. So
yes,
okay.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. So where So you've got this content. It's at certain size. It's still, even at 30, at 20,000 polygons, it's still going to be a certain size. Am I right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can give you real figures. I feel like the smallest, like a minute long hologram at our smallest export setting is about 75 megabytes.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Isn't it incredible? Isn't that incredible?
There's a lot of compression, I'm assuming, but.
Yes. And I mean, we're even working at like we're working very closely with Microsoft to see if we can get it even smaller than that. And because we just recently did our first like activation for Snap, where we did a volumetric lens for Snapchat. Mm-hmm. And they have very severe restrictions on the megabytes for their filters. And we still managed to do, 10 or 15 seconds of volumetric video for a filter of Michael Myers for the Halloween Kills universal activation. Okay. So I forget I think our final megabyte count was maybe like 11 megabytes for that when we were done.
Wow.
Yeah. And it looked pretty good.
Right.
So that's the beauty of working with the system, and why I say it's like commercially viable is that it's getting, I feel like I don't like to make grand statements, because then anyone who's a volumetric like competitor, like I just put a big target on my forehead for them to come at me. But like, I feel like the quality is the best, and I feel like it's the smallest. And that's a really tough to beat.
Yes.
But we're not the cheapest. We have to, we're not like we're not as expensive as sometimes people want to make it sound like we are. I would encourage you to contact us if you're interested in doing a job, but we do have to charge professional production rates in order to do our work. So I guess, that's the area when people come at me, they tend to come at us for that a bit. Right. But like at the end of the day, like as we discussed, the miracle of like technology that the system is, it's just, it's astounding to think about all that data, being compressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process of going through. Let's say I take you up on your offer. I go in to get myself scanned and talk about fly fishing or something, because that's what I talk about. Anyway, so how long does it take to be scanned, and the process for me to turn into, is it at all real time? Is there a lot of post-processing that takes place?
So, I'll walk you through like a customer journey. So
sure.
First, we would have you fill out a new project questionnaire that has all of the details that we need to know to properly like consult and scope out and bid the project.
Sure.
Then we got that all dialed in, we're contracted. We'd like to do, we don't always get it, but we often do get a test day where we would have you come in and we do quick tests of you and your wardrobe, run off like 10 frame renders just to, again, see how it's all looking so we can all feel really confident coming into the production day. That's also our time to test like blocking, props, anything. Mm-hmm. On the production day though, assuming all of the elements are all dialed in and we know what we're doing, you could just go out, do your performance. If you nail it on the first take, that's it. Maybe we have you do one more time for safety. It can be really fast and easy if the talent is like ready to go. We also have teleprompters, so if you need a teleprompter, you can, read it from that.
Right.
And then we will send you the dailies the next day of that performance. In a framed export from one of our cameras.
Okay.
So you can review your performance and you can say, I really like take 1 or I really like take 2. And once you give us the takes for final processing, our standard turnaround is 2 weeks. We say 2 weeks because we are juggling multiple projects simultaneously, and that gives us enough time to deliver. Now, if you were getting 100 minutes of content, we'd have to come up with a custom schedule and do a rolling delivery and identify your priority takes and all that. But we can. I mean, it's not something that you're going to see same day, but if you were our only client and it was a minute of video, we could certainly show it to you the next day,
Right.
And, I would say real time is a very interesting thing. We're all looking at live volumetric and how we can kind of bring that to life at the quality standards that, our customers are gonna require. But it's super exciting, the idea of like live holograms and holographic presence.
I know, because I remember seeing the Microsoft's videos, like, when am I going to be able to do a hologram video call with someone? And I think you guys are close, right? Like I'm perfectly fine going to a stage like yours and getting it done, but being able to do a live performance as a hologram would be absolutely astounding.
It is, and it's kind of the holy grail. And
right.
There are companies that are doing some good work in this area, and we are watching all of them very closely. I think that. Yeah, it's like the closest thing to teleportation that we have,
What is the experience of being on the stage itself for a performer? Because from what I could see, it's a completely closed off space, right? You're not actually looking at anyone. There's green screens everywhere. Is that correct?
That's right. You or whomever you're performing with are alone on the stage. And we get a lot of different feedback about what that feels like. Sometimes people really like it. It can feel like they're performing in their bedroom, and they can feel very free, and or it can feel like a theater experience. And but it can also feel isolating and weird, depending on how you feel, you personally feel on the stage. We do our best to just create like the best vibe we possibly can at Metastage for, creatives to do good work and performers to feel at ease. But it is a kind of a funny thing. You're out there on stage alone, and off stage the director yells action. Yeah. And then you do your thing. You do your thing.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. I find it fascinating. So you guys are using green screens, obviously, to do all your keying. Is that something that you think is going to continue using that, or are you looking at other solutions beyond green screen for keying purposes?
We evaluated whether we wanted to go with a different color for the green screens, and eventually went with the path of least resistance, which was our chroma key green, which has its issues with green spill and things like that. Although we put everything through a color pass before we deliver it, so we make sure that all the green spill is removed before it gets delivered to you. And it's, again, like, a lot of people think the green spill would be really intense. It's actually not as bad as you would think. We're in the process of like, pretty soon we're going to be, well, I can't really say it yet, but there's some exciting developments on the horizon that I'm hopeful will allow us to do some more experimental configurations with the stage and try things that haven't been tried before. But when you're already working with new tech, a lot of times you just want to give yourself as few potential errors as possible, and chroma key green tends to be the industry standard. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I find it really interesting for sure. So, okay, well, we're getting towards the end, and I'm really curious about your thoughts on the metaverse at this point. Like, where obviously there's a lot of people are looking at different ideas of what they want to do, where they want to create things. People wanting to preserve themselves in different ways. I know a lot of celebrities are making NFTs of themselves, for example, of something of that nature. Do you see the formats that you guys are creating as something that's going to have a role to play in a sort of a Web3 metaverse world at some point?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. That volumetric holograms are one tool, one component of the metaverse and Web3.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So as such, obviously you have a great partnership with Microsoft in terms of what they're able to help you out with the formatting and the software that you guys are using to process all this data. Is there going to be a file format or a standard format for holographic experiences? What do you think that's going to be, and how is that going to work?
Yeah, I know that there's a group called like the Volumetric Format Association or something, and they are working hard to create standards for volumetric capture. But I kind of defer to the folks at Microsoft and also the other major players to figure out that piece.
Sure.
Once they do, we will happily work with whatever is the industry standard to make the best experiences and to make like the best commercial content. But yeah, I think Yeah, I don't know about that personally.
Yeah, I'd be very excited because, well, here's what I'm trying to think of all the things I want to do with the volumes that you create. Like, what would the things I would want to create that
What
experience.
would you want to do? What do you want to do?
I want to put it in VR chat, right? And so I can
Yes.
I can be in VR chat and I can be with my friends and we can all look at someone's performance together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly looking at implementations into alt space on the sooner end of things because of the Microsoft relationship there.
Sure, of course.
But I'm a big VR chat fan myself too. So I would love to get some implementations, like to try some stuff out in VR chat. And, if you had any devs that do VR chat worlds and they want some sample data to try to make, something happen, I'd be happy to do a collaboration and see what we could make happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's several things interesting when it comes to VR and volumetric stuff and things of that nature. I've got two big passions. One is digital humans, which you guys are doing, and that's why I'm asking you all these questions. And then the second one is architecture and how architecture is going to be implemented in it. And I actually think it'd be really great to sort of think about what all of that means. So yeah, this is fascinating conversation. I'm very excited about what you're doing, Christina.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I want to throw a couple of plugs out there. One is we have a library of assets you can license in the Unity Asset Store. If you type in Metastage, there's a bunch of just volumetric background actors. So the reason I thought about it was we kind of intended them for architectural visualizations along those lines, like if you want to put real people inside them. So if you have any interest, we have a library of content that you can license. And then finally, I wanted to say that I actually host a VR chat meetup on Wednesday nights.
Nice.
Yeah, I have a little group that gets together on Wednesday nights called XR Social Club. And we meet in either VR chat or alt space. But if you're interested in joining us for a session, it would be fun to world hop together. Yeah. And like I said, 6 p.m. Pacific, Wednesday nights. And if you're interested, just look it up XR Social Club on on Discord or Facebook.
Okay, I will definitely do that. That would be really, really interesting. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for this awesome conversation. I can't wait for people to check things out. We'll put all kinds of links on the podcast page so people can check out those links and check out the content you guys are doing. And I'm sure that people will be very excited about that. We do have a lot of architects that listen to this podcast as well.
Nice.
So they will be very excited to find out more about getting some of your guys in there for sure.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a lot of fun.